Imagine leaving home one day, for work or school, like any other day, and never being able to return home. Imagine not being allowed to enter the only home you've ever known your entire life, with all your belongings in there, and not knowing what to do or where to go. Let me tell you about the time when I was homeless with drug-addicted parents in East Los Angeles. My first-hand experience of losing a home, parental drug abuse, the results of sobriety, and my family's search for stability during a chaotic time. My family's struggles can honestly be traced back to my dad. At a young age, I knew he used drugs. He was in and out of jail most of my childhood. He was never known to hold a job. One year, after being released from jail, he decided to live with my mom, brother, and I again. He still did drugs, but this time, my mom decided to do drugs with him. It became an addiction that led to her losing her job. Without stable income, we weren't able to make rent each month, and eventually, after a few months of missed rent, our landlord went forward with an eviction. We lived day by day in a paranoid atmosphere. What if we went out for groceries and came back to the sheriff seizing the property? And what if I was at school while they seized the property? What if I was at school while they seized the property? This was the fear we lived with during those times, and eventually it got to the point where one of us always had to stay home. Then came the day I will never forget. February 13th, 2019. It was a misty afternoon, and I had just gotten out of school. My mom had texted me to meet her at the nearby church instead of taking the bus home. That's strange. As I approached the church, I noticed my dog sticking his head out of a U-Haul window. Is that my dog? As I got a closer look, I noticed my mom sitting in the driver's seat of that U-Haul. As I realized what was happening, the deepest pit welled in my stomach. We picked up my brother from school next, and then drove to a nearby hotel. That night, in my first of many hotel rooms, I felt hopeless. The only home I've ever known my entire life was ripped away. The word I dared not think of for the past few months started to take shape. Homeless. Homeless families have little options once they become homeless. My mom applied for county aid, which was a week's worth of hotel vouchers renewable once. We were not qualified for any food aid. Like any homeless mother would, my mom spent some of the hotel money on food, and we were then accused of fraud. We were ineligible for any aid after that. I remember being really, really sick one of those days living in the hotel rooms, and my mom had no money to spare. She had to decide between spending money on medicine for me or food for the day. She chose medicine, and the only food between my mom, brother, and I for the entire day was a small cup of noodle and a small slice of pizza. We starved. By then, it had also been days since we'd seen our dad. He had left saying he was going to go find food, and he never returned. He had walked out on us. Eventually, surviving the hotels became too difficult to handle, and my mom had to face perhaps the hardest decision a homeless family could make, to willingly separate. My mom sat my brother and I down and told us she simply could no longer afford to care for us. We were to be sent off and living with relatives for a bit. To be separated from mom was the last thing I wanted to do at the moment. But my mom decided to do what was right, knowing that at least my brother and I would be off the streets. I hugged my mom for a really long time before letting go. Family Gateway, an organization dedicated to homeless children and families, estimates that about 1 in 30, or 2.5 million American children are homeless each year. The average homeless family is a single mom and her 2 kids, and homeless families comprise of about 50% of the homeless population. During the separation, my brother and I hopped between relatives and still went to school in LA. The main place we were able to stay at was at our aunt's house, almost 2 hours away from LA, in the Mojave Desert, where my grandma also stayed. My grandma, brother, and I would wake up at 4 a.m. to catch the train to LA to get to school. We were always late and frequently absent. Sadly, during this time, no one was able to take care of our dog, and so we had to put him down. I also never got to see my mom for days. All these thoughts were in my head, like when will I be able to see her next? Will she be cold where she sleeps tonight, on a park bench or on a train station platform? Will she be hungry? Will she be safe today, tomorrow? Then something miraculous happened. While staying at my aunt's house, I received an acceptance letter and full scholarship to PhillipsExeterAcademy, a boarding school all the way in New Hampshire. This was a life-changing moment. Exeter flew my mom and I out to attend a complimentary admissions event in late March. That was the first time I got to see my mom in almost a month, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a small glimmer of hope. Coming back from Exeter, my family began our road to recovery. We were still living separately, but my mom was even more determined to reunite us as fast as she could. She went from 100 to 110% effort. She worked Postmates food delivery on foot and was soon able to rent a rental car for Uber. She worked Postmates and Uber all day long and slept in her car during the night. She also began her long and hard journey to become sober. I finally graduated middle school, and my mom, feeling really good about her income, decided to apply to apartments that summer. We were turned down. Apartments did not view Postmates or Uber as stable income. I soon left for Phillips Exeter in September and suddenly had a bed of my own and endless food to eat. However, my mom and brother were still homeless back in Los Angeles. In October, though, my mom made another milestone. She was hired at a stable office job. She slowly saved up enough money, and in March 2020, right as the pandemic started, we were able to rent a small house. We finally had a place to call home, with a fridge full of food, beds for each one of us, a sense of security, and a place to love and be with each other again. My family's search for stability was finally accomplished. The Los Angeles Homeless Services Authority estimates that in 2019, roughly 59,000 homeless people lived in LA County, including myself. 15,000 of them were considered chronically homeless. In other words, roughly 75% of homeless people will break free in the near future, but 25% of homeless people will stay homeless. The last time I saw my dad was almost a year ago at my grandma's funeral, where he asked my brother for money, specifically for drugs. He chose to keep his lifestyle, and he still lives on the streets. To this day, I still remember how vulnerable and visible I was in the hotel lobbies when my family and I would bring up bags and clothes and blankets and food in a big old cart up to our hotel room, looking suspiciously like we were homeless. People in the lobbies used to stop and stare at us, observe us, as if somehow we were lower human beings. However, while at school last year, I never got any stares at me. I was like any other student at PhillipsExeterAcademy. I focused on classwork, hung with friends, participated in clubs and extracurriculars, and no one ever stared at me then. My mom went to her office job every day and worked hard like everyone else, and she never got any stares or looks of pity from coworkers. I hope after hearing this today, you will start thinking differently of homeless people, simply because you never know people's struggles in life. The reason why I got judged differently in the hotels and at school was because in the hotels, my homelessness was visible. However, I was lucky in the fact that I got to go to a school in which I was equal to everyone else. The most vulnerable populations of homeless people, those of us who have to sleep on the streets or in shelters or do gig work like my mom did, don't get to become invisible. Next time, give your gig worker a bigger tip. Next time, treat a homeless person with kindness. For all you know, they could be fighting day and night to change their lives for the better. Thank you.